The Mass for the Dead, a history of Ouro Preto. They say that in Ouro Preto, among winding stone alleys and centuries-old mansions with worm-eaten wooden windows, there is a little-known church, so forgotten that it no longer appears on maps. The elders, however, still whisper its name in a low voice, as if they were afraid of awakening something dormant, Chapel of Silent Souls. It rests among hills covered in mist, next to an old cemetery, where priests, slaves, sugar mill owners and people who have been forgotten even by their own descendants sleep. The tombstones worn by time creak in the wind, as if they were murmuring lost prayers in the early hours of the morning. In that forgotten place lived Joachim, a man in his late 70s, thin, with a face furrowed by time, and a tired look. He was the caretaker of the chapel and the sacristan. He lived alone in a modest house behind the church, accustomed to the smell of old wood, the leaking roof, and the inexplicable sounds that came from the darkness, cracks, sighs, muffled footsteps. He had never been afraid. Or at least he said he wasn't. But that night, that July night, something different happened. The clock was exactly 2 in the morning when Joachim woke up with a start. The air was cold, and there was a sound coming from inside the church. A low, drawn-out lament, as if someone were playing the organ. The notes echoed in a mournful melody, deep and solemn, like a march to the afterlife. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was dreaming. But the sound persisted, and with it came a smell of burning wax, mixed with old incense. Alarmed, but still in disbelief, he grabbed his flashlight, wrapped his coat around his shoulders, and walked slowly to the chapel door. As he leaned against the heavy wood, he noticed something strange. It was ajar. He pushed cautiously. The door creaked with a dry, creak sound, as if protesting the intrusion. Inside, the darkness was broken only by a greenish light that pulsed from the altar, a light that shouldn't be there. Joachim took a step, then another, and then stopped, completely still. The pews were occupied. The church, empty for decades, was filled with figures. Faithful, but not alive. They were skeletons. Some covered with frayed veils, others with ceremonial robes from another era, from the time of gold, faith, and punishment. The empty eye sockets seemed to watch him, but without eyes. Just a dark, infinite void. In the air, a thick mist rippled, as if breathing along with the chants. They were chanting something in Latin, but there was something wrong. The pronunciation was guttural, drawn out, as if the words were being forced through throats that had long since rotted. A chill ran down Joachim's spine. Little by little, he approached the altar. Each step seemed to echo too much. The sound of his shoes sounded like funeral drums in a crypt. When he looked at the altar, his heart almost stopped. There was the priest. Or something that had once been one. Tall. Thin. Covered by a black robe that floated slightly as if it were underwater. His face was a gleaming skull, his jaw clenched in a crooked smile. In his hands, he held a golden chalice that shone with a strange light. Requiem aeternam dona eis, he murmured, as the sound echoed through the broken stained glass windows. Joachim wanted to run. He wanted to scream. But his feet were glued to the floor. It was as if invisible hands were holding him down. Or as if his soul was being slowly dragged into that dark ritual. Something was calling him. A whisper in the wind. An invitation that could not be refused. Then, everything stopped. The organ fell silent. The chant ceased. Just silence. Thick. Suffocating. All the skeletons turned their heads toward him, like puppets following a command. The priest raised the chalice toward him, and his voice was now clear. Firm. In Portuguese. It's time to pray for your soul, Joachim. You forgot to light the last candle. And in that moment, everything made sense. 33 years ago, Joachim had been the last person responsible for closing that church after a fire that had started in the cemetery next door. In the confusion, he had forgotten one last sacred gesture, to light the candle for the dead before sealing the doors of the temple. Without the candle, the spirits never found rest. Ever since then, he had been pushing the moment away. Running away. Denying it. But the time of the dead is different. And that night, the mass was for him. Joaquin fell to his knees. The lights went out. One by one. And then, nothing. The next morning, the church was found with the door wide open. There was no sign of a break-in, no footprints in the dust. But on the altar was a single candle lit, flickering. And on the front pew rested a skeleton with a rosary between its fingers. Since then, they say that every July 2nd, when the wind blows colder and the shadows seem to grow too long, the mass for the dead happens again, waiting patiently for the next caretaker to forget about it.